The risk of leaving the stability of a 9 to 5 corporate job to align with your higher calling is big enough. But imagine doing so with $60,000 in student loans, a looming DUI, and a baby on the way. Well, that is exactly the plight of today's guest, Omari Harebin, who chose to risk everything to create a life he loved. He went from late night shifts at Verizon to growing a six-figure digital product business, and he's here today to tell us just how he did that. All right. So good morning, Amari. How you doing today?
I'm doing really good, Omni. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to have you today and to interview you because I read over your website and, like I said, the first chapter of your book. And I just really found it to be truly inspirational. And I think that it's a story that will benefit your journey is a story that will benefit all of those who get a chance to hear it. So to just kick off, why don't you tell me a little bit about your educational and your occupational background?
So I went to school for mechanical engineering, and when I graduated, I started working as a network engineer for Verizon. So I was in a leadership development program for 3.5 years where I had different roles in the organization, um, project management, data engineering, supervising network technicians. And so that gave me my corporate experience that I needed to have to grow and develop.
Well, that's wonderful. And so it sounded like it was a good experience, but obviously the corporate life is not for everybody. So what about that 9 to 5 job did you find unfulfilling, or what about it made you want to transition into spiritual entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so I was always doing my thing on the side, from school days to college to now I was working professionally and I was still doing my thing on the side. And so that thing at the time was photography and videography.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to be doing that all the time. I didn't want it to be just a side thing or a side hustle. And I was looking out at what my creative peers were doing, and I was like, um, this is in the early days of Instagram, so there wasn't much of a gram to look at. But
Right.
from what you could see at the time, it seemed like everyone around me creatively were doing amazing things, and I just wanted to be outside of the cubicle doing that too. Spiritual entrepreneurship wasn't something that was conscious to me at the time, but I remember sitting in my cubicle writing down my dream job description. And that dream job description was to be a messenger of love and light around the world. And I had no idea how I would materialize that, but I knew that if it was a strong enough desire and I had enough faith that I would be able to.
That's wonderful. So you saw yourself early days as a light worker.
I've never said that before, but I guess that's what it is.
Yes, I think so, definitely. So, how did you first handle the internal struggle between leaving something that we deem as safe, such as a
Mhm.
corporate job, to taking the risk of something that we've deemed as uncertainty as entrepreneurship? Because there had to be some kind of struggle, thinking about finances, thinking about family, how did you deal? What was your internal struggle like, and how did you deal with it?
Yeah, so it felt like death. It felt like dying in the sense of this unknown, like, world. Like, what is it like to exist outside of this? And when I say outside of this, it wasn't just the corporate world for me, it was just the entire thing that leads up to the corporate world, like the entire academic system, the school system, the jobs, the work, the corporate system. And so the thing that actually pushed me over the edge was two things. I was becoming a dad, my wife was pregnant, and I also had a DUI charge at the same time. So I had these two, I had a countdown on me, two countdowns, life coming and the removal of privileges and permissions. So it was a very metaphoric time as well because uh I was seeing myself as if I was on a corporate plantation,
Mm.
and to leave that corporate plantation requires um you know some otherworldly kind of like power to survive that. And
Mhm.
so with a new life coming into the world, that's where I felt my power was. My power was in this regeneration of self and identity and purpose, and a desire that this new life that I was coming into the world with, that this life would grow up to see me a certain way, and it
Mhm.
would grow up to see me free. It would grow up to see me outside of the plantation. It would grow up to see me independent. And so I invested all of my powers, all of
Mhm.
my faith,
Yes.
all of
Yes.
my faith into that right there of like, man, I'm if there's enough creativity flowing through me to create this new life, then this new life, being in alignment with it is enough to create an entirely new life that I wanted to live.
Mhm.
So that's how I made the the trans. So it wasn't easy, right? I didn't have any savings. I didn't have, I had student loan debt, which I felt like I couldn't do anything until I got rid of that, and that seemed
Mhm.
like it would take forever. So
Insurmountable.
insurmountable, right? That's the
Mhm.
feeling. So it was a really jumping off the cliff and spreading your wings type of a adventure for me. And that's what that's what got me to leave the corporation, the
Mhm.
nine.
Okay, so you did not have you did it all at once. You did not have that transition, and like you said,
Yeah.
it's like, jumping off a cliff and building your parachute on the way down, and
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure it out that way. And that can be very scary, and it's easier said than done, but you are proof that it can be done, and that your family, your wife and your child who is on the way, it was truly inspirational to you. And then also I felt like you feel that lack of freedom in your environment, but also like you said, your privileges possibly being taken away because the DUI charge. So I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that need for freedom, I feel like that's a human part of our human nature. And when you
Yep.
are suppressed in that way, that really drives you, because it'll either drive you crazy or it'll drive you out of your situation, and
Yeah.
for you, good thing that it drove you out of your situation. So what were your first step like on a more fundamental level? Like, did you
Mm-hmm.
put in your 2 weeks notice, and then the first day, did you open a website? Like those first, what were those first fundamental steps that you took in this transition?
Yeah, so I went on paternity leave. So
Hmm.
the day before paternity leave, I was in the courtroom, and the judge took away my license for a couple years and a whole bunch of fines and fees and so on.
Wow.
So my wife had to drive me home from the courthouse, right? Now I'm on paternity leave, and my mom has to come to drive us to the hospital to have the baby, right? So I'm feeling at my lowest as a man when
Mm-hmm.
I'm becoming, at the beginning of becoming a man.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm on paternity leave, and I'm building up the courage to put in the resignation, because um I still don't know how I'm gonna survive. Like I'm doing this photography thing. I'm updating my website.
Mm-hmm.
I'm, making sure my portfolio looks good, but I don't actually have a true plan or business mind yet. I'm so far gone in my faith needing to carry me that my faith is also a little bit mixed in with a lot of wishful thinking. So that wishful thinking manifests as, if I just make the leap in a
Mm-hmm.
public way and put myself, quote unquote, out there, that some provisions will be made.
Right.
And obviously, provisions were always made, or otherwise I wouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm.
But those very first steps were just, okay, now I'm freelancing full time. So I put in my resignation finally, and I'm like, all right, now it's all in with my photography skills, but I can't drive anywhere. So I was driving the shoots before all over the state. I'm doing all this stuff, but now I'm a little bit constrained. And so I have to re engineer what I'm going to do. And so the internet becomes my avenue. So web design becomes the vehicle for me to create something and make some money using the internet without having to drive anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I got my foot in those first couple of months after leaving corporate, was freelancing as a Squarespace web designer on the internet and building around just that simple idea that I could have an online business and that an online business could potentially create enough passive income where I could do other things.
That's powerful. That's really powerful. What I got from that, what I thought was very just from a, because I'm a spiritual person, but what I got from that, it's interesting that you went from corporate to freelancing. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Even just that freedom, even though you had constraints, you were able to freely do what it was that you wanted to do. I also think it's interesting that you are at a point of conception. You were rebirthing a new point of yourself. And for conception, you need both masculine and feminine energy. So you were definitely putting out the action, you were doing the practical steps, but you were also forced to have to receive, which is a feminine quality because your wife had to drive, your mother had to drive you in from feminine energy. So that mix of like your own action plus being forced to receive, I find that you made that conception of your new self. And then you were made to stay in your home, which became essentially a womb for you to grow in. You know, you had to be able to grow within that space because you had no other choice. And you were able to create something that was, you know, working for you, that passive income. So I just think that's really, really dope. And so in the beginning, the challenges that you faced were obviously not being able to move around as you want to. Did you find that that affected your family dynamic at all?
Well, yeah, the womb that you speak of, I had to move back into the house that I grew up in. I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
now I know it's a common experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to move back to that womb and basically start all over again, in terms of like myself, who I was. So I had to
Mm-hmm.
go back to the room I grew up in order to like regrow as a different person. And a lot of that regrowth was just thinking about um uh the value that I was bringing to the world
Mm-hmm.
differently. um Before this transition, it was very everything was self-serving. My creativity couldn't be fully expressed. I didn't know how to do the things that were in my mind, right? Like that I wanted to really be able to do. So um that yeah, that's what was going that's what was going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. So tell me about, because I know that you said you offer photography, videography, but I also know that you have coaching and this wonderful book, The Corporate Dropout. I absolutely love the title of that. Tell me a little bit more about your products and services and detail what the book is about.
Yeah, so The Corporate Dropout is my memoir that takes you through this entire journey. I just shared with you, the first couple of chapters.
Yes.
But if you're curious about, how to actually make this transition when you don't have it all figured out in the beginning, when you don't have a savings, when you just don't have all the stuff that the people who are responsible say you should have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that can cause you to feel, you know, like compounded worse than you already feel, right? It's like you're already in an uncomfortable situation, but to be uncomfortable, that's what this
Mm-hmm.
book helps you get through. It shows you that there's another side to that story, that if you keep pushing and if you keep persistent, that there are practical things that you can do. There are
Mm-hmm.
practical ways that you can approach the problems that you're solving so that other people can benefit. And then that transfer of energy, that's where your livelihood is. That's where your prosperity is. So that's what the corporate dropout memoir is
Yes.
about. And then I also offer coaching where I work directly one on one with solopreneurs, freelancers to take their freelancing to actual freedom. So one of the things I
Mm-hmm.
learned freelancing was that it's not actually freedom. It's just it's more convenient for the employer in many cases, and it gives you a little bit of flexibility, but you're still you're still working hourly. You're still chained to this time, what I call the time money matrix. So the coaching that I provide, I help people get out of that paradigm of
Mm-hmm.
working for money and working essentially for assets, like to not work for assets, but to create assets that then work for you. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the shift that we make with freelance to freedom, which is my coaching. And that's what I do now.
Yeah. Do you have a copy of the book?
Someone just walked in the studio and I gave them a free copy that I was going
But
to share.
you tell me what was on the cover of the book.
So on the cover of the book, and you can check out the link that goes with
Hmm.
this.
And I'll put the link in the bio. I mean, in
Yeah,
the caption. Yes.
it's the vision wall that I started with. So people make vision boards all the time when they're going through these kind of transitions, and
Hmm.
usually on a vision board you put the things, you put the house, the all the stuff,
Yes.
maybe some words and stuff. But for me, I was recreating a man. And so my vision board consisted of all of the colonial dropouts that came before me. So the icons and figures that I grew up on as a young Black boy, I put them up on my wall so that the little boy who was redeveloping himself would have a very clear vision of the kind of man he was becoming, the kind of uh, men that he would ultimately join.
Hmm.
So that's what's on the cover of the corporate dropout. It's an ode to the colonial dropouts that came 100 years before.
I love that. I love that. So after you've gained so much knowledge and wisdom from this journey, being, you said 11 years, you said you've been out of the
Yeah.
corporate world, 11 years. Knowing what you know now, is there anything that you would have done differently along your journey?
No, no. You always think, yeah, like I'm always time traveling in a sense to kind of go back and give myself what I didn't have.
Hmm.
But moving forward, there's nothing that I could do differently.
I love that.
'Cause everything I did is what I needed to get to where I am. But for someone who is where I was, oh,
Hmm.
there's a world of things that I would do differently.
Give them some
Uh,
advice. Let's leave them with some advice.
well, well, this is why the advice is tough and why I wrote the book is because I was in a crisis. So, you know, it's difficult. However, had I not been in a crisis, I would have found somebody like myself to listen to, and I would
Mhm.
listen to them.
Yeah.
Um, and I would do what they say if and only if I know that they've been where I've been and that they are where I want to be. That's kind of what I look for in a mentor. It's like
Hmm.
you're doing what I want to be doing, and you know what my experience is like right now, so I can
Yes.
trust you and I could believe you and I can follow you. And those mistakes that I made along the way that took me 5, 6, 7, 8 years to master, um, you can master them in a lot shorter time when you are surrounded by people who've already mastered the thing.
Hmm.
So, a real quick example, like let's say someone wants to raise their price for a particular service. The faster you can surround yourself with people who have already done that, then the
Hmm.
less of a big deal it feels. Like that, it starts to feel like, oh, I'm naturally what the being does is it tries to reflect what's around it.
Hmm.
So getting yourself surrounded by people who are doing the thing you want to do in the way that you want to do it as quickly as possible is the fastest way to make these kinds of transitions.
Okay. And define for me what your spiritual gifts are as a spiritual entrepreneur.
Clarity, perspective, and insight. So clarity into the unknown, clarity into the unseen, clarity into what is uncertain, um, insight and all of that, and perspective so that you can see things differently. And when you can see things differently, everything changes.
That's wonderful, 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 wonderful. So lastly, what has been the most fulfilling part of this transition for you?
Um, Being able to have these conversations and share these stories, because for a long time I couldn't have these conversations and share them with the kind of passion that I'm sharing this with you now.
Well, that's wonderful. I want to thank you so much. I just want to let you know that your story has truly inspired me. We go through the ups and downs, we go through the doubts and the fears, but to see like where you start, like you said, you started in crisis and you were able to grow something so wonderful that supports you, supports your family, supports your spiritual growth, and there's others out there who definitely need this story and use it as a benchmark as they continue on their journey. So I just want to thank you so much. I'm going to be putting the information to Omari's website where you can find his book and his coaching in on his website in the caption below. You can contact him to learn more about his story or to actually get the coaching to progress in your journey. And I just want to thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.